Capcom has swung at 4 remakes and hit on most of them, and not one of them was just a graphical update. Every single one added something the original couldn't. RE1 is on the list, and the question isn't whether they can do it, it's whether they'll do it right. Because the story sitting underneath that mansion connects directly to where this franchise is going. Now, it's no secret at this point the RE1 Remake has been circling for a while. With the amount of leaks there have been, in my opinion, this thing is all but confirmed. But every time this community talks about an RE1 Remake, the conversation is always the same. It always comes back to whether we need this remake or not. And if we do get it, it's just going to be an RE Engine remake with updated controls and updated enemies. But that's not at all what this franchise does with its remakes. RE2 updated RPD, but it also rewrote Ada's mission with enough mystery to have an entire subplot. RE4 did tighten up the combat and it looks amazing, but it also added a Sadler cutscene that totally remapped the Las Plagas. On top of all the beautiful cosmetic changes, Capcom always uses remakes to plant things that weren't possible to plant the first time through. Connections the story only needs because of where it's going next. Resident Evil 1 will be no different. Now there's a lot to address, I know. This game is rich with lore and characters, which is why it's still one of my favorites in the franchise. You got Rebecca's timeline before Bravo Team, Barry's deal with Wesker, new wrinkles to what Chris and Jill actually witnessed before that mansion comes down. But today we're talking Wesker. Because with everything RE9 showed us and the questions it created, with what Xeno represents, with where that character comes from, the groundwork for all of this starts in 1998 inside Spencer Mansion, and it starts with Lisa Trevor. Now, Lisa Trevor is the tragedy everyone acknowledges, but to me it lacks in telling. Her father designed the Spencer Mansion. Spencer had him killed when construction was finished. Absolutely diabolical. But honestly, was George all that innocent? I mean, the guy helped build many death traps and he knew about it. Anyway, her mother disappeared into the progenitor trials. Lisa was a child when this all started, taken and experimented on, and she survived. Every single thing they put into her, she survived it all. But, and this is a big but, she broke. Yeah, she had crazy resilience, but her mind didn't. And that specific failure is the most important moment in Albert Wesker's life, long before he walked into that mansion. Because Spencer did chalk this up as a loss, that's true, but he didn't just stop there. He treated that loss as a lesson instead of a total failure. What she proved was this: you cannot build something out of this world on a well-developed being. By the time a person has, well, become a person with her own history and self-awareness, the research has too much to fight against, giving you a resilient body, but too much damage and resistance in the mind. Spencer's answer was Project W. Don't experiment on developed humans. Select the subjects earlier. Find children that could handle mutation and simply shape them from the ground up. So without Lisa Trevor's failure, without that specific lesson, Spencer never pursues Project W. She doesn't just deserve more screen time in the remake because her story is devastating, which in my opinion, her story is the most tragic in this franchise. She deserves it because she is the origin of Wesker's existence. We have to give her the respect she deserves. Now the big question is the twist. What do we do with the twist? Well, it's simple. You do nothing. The reality is fresh eyes, new people are going to be playing this game for the first time. There are going to be people who've heard the name Wesker but don't know what he becomes. Capcom is not going to spill the beans early here. The betrayal lands the same way it always has. But that doesn't mean you can't show more. What if the remake gives us a Wesker who lingers a little bit, who passes a lab section and his eyes stay on the equipment a beat too long, who has a throwaway exchange about experimental results where his reaction is just slightly off? Not enough to catch on the first playthrough, but when you play it again, it becomes clearer. It's all subtle, but there if you look for it. And then there's Jill Valentine. Wesker's relationship with Jill in the original is professional, a touch weird, but he is her commanding officer. That's the surface. But we all know what it becomes. RE5 makes that obsession very clear. But the question has always been, where does it start? I mean, yeah, blood tests confirm her unique immunities after RE3, but this started before that. Watching her work watching her survive encounters that she just shouldn't be surviving. Wesker has spent his career researching and analyzing data. He knows what a normal person should be able to survive, and Jill ain't normal. She is special, and a man with his background can't just ignore that. The mission was to test BOWs on stars, but he finds something more. He doesn't know why yet, he just knows she's different. One look held a second too long, another little expression the camera catches that the player won't understand until RE5. That's all the remake needs to plant. Just give that payoff more weight. So now everything starts to come together a little bit. We learn about Lisa Trevor and what she meant to Project W. Wesker's more suspicious and he's watching Jill closely. And then, somewhere in the back half of that mansion, he finds something. Not everything, but enough. Enough to confirm what he suspected about Project W, and to see his own name in a file that isn't a personal file. He begins to understand that the entire scope of his career, I'm talking Umbrella, Stars, every assignment he thought he chose, was made around him, not by him. Spencer built Wesker to be the subject. And that right there is what changes the injection. We all know that Birkin gave him a prototype virus that he would inject himself with, and every version of this story paints it as ambition. Wesker wanted to transcend, to be reborn and become something beyond human, which isn't wrong, that's all true, but it's not complete. Because the alternative was completing Spencer's project on Spencer's terms, becoming what someone else designed on someone else's schedule. The injection was for sure ambition and ego play, but it was also refusal. It's him saying, I'm doing things my way now. So he injects himself. He lets Stars believe he died and walks out of that mansion assuming everything Spencer built around him is buried in the rubble. He thought he destroyed it. He thought he could just close that chapter and move on. Well, we know that's not true. We know a certain group got their grubby little paws on what makes Wesker Wesker, but that's a different video. What matters here is the weight of that moment. If the remake shows us a Wesker who isn't just making a move, but rather making a decision under pressure, then every smug, controlled scene you remember from the original gets a different layer underneath it. That's what digging deep gives you. A deeper, truer version of an already great story. So here's where I'm at. The RE1 Remake doesn't need to rebuild the ending. It doesn't need to move the twist or add a post-credit sequence that throws everything in our face, and it 100% does not need to change anything about the story. In fact, I need to keep it all, but what it needs to do is find the space between what was shown and what was always there. Lisa Trevor was always the proof that Project W could work. You just have to make that visible. Wesker was always suspicious of who he was. Make the suspicion a little more seen. And Jill was always exceptional. Give him a reason to notice. Do those three things subtly. Again, we're not talking story-breaking moments, just planting seeds that connect the dots just a little more clearer. Then the RE1 Remake becomes something you can revisit after RE9 and see an entirely different story underneath. That's what's worth making. That's worth the remake. Man, this gets me excited to be able to walk through Spencer Mansion again, but what do you think? Is this something they should do, or should they leave it be? Now, if you want more coverage like this, then join the Dead Zone and hit that sub button. We are the Respawn Bros. Thank you for stopping by, and as always, keep dying, keep trying.